Welcome back to Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. What a nice break that was. You're on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net, if you didn't know. So, what we ask is that you push the donate button. Now, you can subscribe to the archives for free. Don't worry about that. But do donate to the station because it's very important. Everything costs money. All the electricity isn't free. And the cloud, the servers are in the cloud now, Mickey, which is really nice.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Ah, look at them clouding things, right?
Wow.
Getting all misty. Did you know that you can buy merchandise from the station's website, which is great? And you can get a t-shirt or a mug or anything you like. And that way, you get something in return, something physical, something tangible. There are ways of donating to the station where that is just a feeling that you get. They'll accept money in any form. I should be very careful. Rather than saying in any form, I retract that and reiterate that there's many ways that you can donate. Please use the instructions on the station's website to do so. That'll do.
That'll do indeed.
Mr. Shrub. Okay, so and we but this is Mecky and I. We thank you for listening to Revolution Radio. This is show number 531.
130 and 500.
And if you're a fan of ours, or if you're a listener, you could be a long-time listener and never called. We're halfway through the show. So there was the beginning, and now this is the middle. And this is where we get into, if you know us, this is where we get into the show topic. And we've been speaking about, for the last 4 hours shows, we've been speaking about something wonderful, and that's prophecies. And I, for the life of me, don't know what page we're on. And I'm going to hand it to
That's all great. No, I'll take the first bit. It's page 36, but we've been talking to you, or rather reading out to you, I guess, or relaying to you. Last show we started a conference that was held in 1986. Excuse me. By the it's actually called the Continental Indigenous Council, which was held in Tanana Valley Fairgrounds in Fairbanks, Alaska. Okay, and it was it's a talk that was given at that point. It's Lee Brown gave that talk, and we talked about Lee Brown, I should say, talked about a whole bunch of prophecies and 2 great shakings that would happen in the world as well. I'm sorry, 38 in fact, Dave, on page 38. And now we've come to the 3rd shaking. So shaking number 1 was World War I, shaking number 2 was World War III, or at least that's what the native prophecies tell us. And so they say there's going to be the 3rd shaking of the earth. It's not going to be a good thing to see, but we will survive it. We will survive it. Now he's referring to the Native Americans here. Not so much necessarily you and me, unless you happen to be.
No, the we is his group.
Yeah, his people. Mm-hmm. And when we survive it, he goes on, then there's going to be another attempt to make a circle of the human beings on the earth. And this time the native people will not have to petition to join, but will be invited to enter the circle because they say the attitude towards us will have changed by then, and people will let us into the circle, and all the 4 colors of the 4 directions will share their wisdom, and there will be a peace on earth. This is coming close. A lot of times when I share this message of the prophecies, people say, can't we change it? Could we stop it? The answer is yes. The prophecies are always either or. We could have come together way back there in 1565, and we could have had a great civilization, but we didn't. Always along the path of these prophecies, we could have come together. We still could. If we could stop the racial and religious disharmony, we would not have to go through this 3rd shaking. And just a quick interjection here, sorry. And this is what my grandmother always used to say as well. The stars never force, they always bend towards you. So die Sterne neigen sich, sie zwingen nicht, right? And it's the same with the future from our point of view. And you have to understand that time can only be understood from the point of view of the person that experiences time at that moment. Okay? It's always from the point of the observer. And from the point of the observer, the past has happened. So we are the observer at this point, and all we have is the eternal now, right now. But the past has happened. So from our point of view, the past has happened. So we know what is it? It's frozen pretty much, right? In a jello. But the future, from our point of view, again, the observer, has not happened. So therefore, the outcome is open. So it's not predetermined. There are certain things that are more likely to happen than others. Quantum mechanics tells us it's a field of probabilities, really, right? But they're all possible. Some are more likely than others, sure, but they're all possible. And this is what we're talking about here, right? So prophecies can glean future pathways and future developments. That's what I believe. These some people have a special gift, I think, that can, transcend the space-time matrix we're caught in, or make use of the fissures and fractures within the space-time matrix, because I'm convinced it's broken. Okay, be that as it may. So some people have the ability to transcend the flow of time as we perceive it, but they can only see probabilities, fields of probabilities, likely things that are that are happening, and things that are less likely to happen. And the very act or the very existence of a prophecy of a prediction may very well change the outcome of the future, right? Potentially. It may not, but it might. There's a story of the time traveler. I don't know if you all remember, who was on the messaging boards when the internet first started out.
Oh, yes.
Right? And he said, well, this is what's going to happen, etc., etc. So none of the things that this time traveler, Cantor, was it Cantor?
Something like that.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, none of the things he predicted or told us about the future came true. Now, the argument here could be, of course, well, is that because he made those predictions? Is that because we were forewarned and cooler heads prevailed? Look, I don't know. But the point is, the future is a field of probabilities, because the future, from our point of view, does not exist yet. Again, observer is important here. Now, he goes on to say, the elders say the chance of that is pretty slim. It seems to me like it's pretty slim too. Now that's what they're saying is it's very slim to avoid the third shaking. But they say what we can do is we can cushion it. The word we use is cushion. We can cushion it so it won't be quite as bad. How do we do this? We do this by sharing the teachings that will reunite us. The Hopis in their prophecies say there will be a religion that comes here. Maybe it will be true and bring unity, or maybe it will not be true and not bring unity. If it does not bring unity, a second religion will come. And the people of this religion are known in the Hopi language as the Bahani, the people of Baha. Ni means people of. So I was looking for the people of Baha. I wondered who the people of Baha were. I was a Baha'i for quite a while before somebody told me that Baha'i means people of Baha. I thought, oh my God. Here I was looking for it all these years and I never even noticed it. And I found it. I was stubborn and I didn't want to become a Baha'i. But my grandfather, who passed away, he must have found out about it in the next round, because he came back to me 4 times to tell me, hey, look at that again. Look at that again. Look one more time. Baha, it means light or glory. Baha'i means follower of the light, or the people of Baha. We've been waiting for these people for a long time. They say they will bring a teaching that will unite the earth. So we need to share this teaching. They say the fire will come from the north. So here we are in a circle in the north, talking about the Baha'is, the people of Baha, and the teachings of Baha'u'llah. When I heard about these prophecies, none of them made any sense. Now most of it has come to pass. Last I heard on the news, they said that the house in the sky will be put up in 1996. It was going to be put up sooner, but it's been postponed for 4 years. Maybe it will be postponed again, but in not too long, it's going to go up. The earth as we know it is going to change. Each of us carry, I believe, a sacred drop of light. In the Indian teachings, they say it takes 9 ancestors to agree before conception can occur. 9 ancestors of the husband and the wife have to come together in the spiritual realm and say, we will bring life before a woman can become pregnant. At that time, the soul is born. Dave?
I delivered my first daughter and a man from the blood reserve who went to South Dakota and was the first blood in 82 years. He came to my house by coincidence 4 days before my wife went into labor. Each night we had a ceremony, and on the morning after, on the morning after the 4th ceremony, my wife went into labor at sunrise, and that night at sunset my daughter was born. And I took her out, and I cut the cord, and I noticed at the Sundance that what people do in South Dakota, they pass the pipe 3 times, and they don't take it until the 4th time. And even in Washington, I've heard the coming of a child is like the coming of a new pipe. When I was delivering my daughter, I happened to notice that the skull came out 3 times, and on the 4th time, her head came out like the coming of of a pipe. First, I put her on the mother instantly, and after a few minutes, I cleaned her up and I washed her up. There was a circle of people just about like this around my wife, and there were people of different backgrounds, and we looked up, and through the ceiling came a small drop of blue light. When it got close to the child, you could not see it. That was her soul. She will carry that light throughout earth. In that is her special uniqueness as a being, a spiritual power. In that are gifts. After we go through and then we carry it back here, and it radiates to she mind, but for some reason in this cycle we've been in the lower natures, the animal thought. But now we're going into the human world. The mind is going to be opened up to the radiance of our own soul, and the cycle of human beings is going to come back. And something is so good is to happen on earth that it cannot even be described. The elders say it in different ways. They say there will be grass at that time when they make the circle and bring the peace on earth. There'll be blades of grass that have not quite come through the earth. Even they will try to push themselves up to be part of that day when the sun rises. The elders explain it like this: out here, outside this building, long before there was a fairground, here there were native people. They say many of these native people in different tribes were aware of these things, and they told their children. Their children grew up. You know, one time the scientist came to the Hopis and they said, we want to take a piece of the stone tablets. They said, we want to take the stone tablets to a scientific laboratory to determine how old they are. The Hopis said, we know how old they are. Well, said the scientists, we want to confirm it. Well, the Hopis let them take a little piece, and they did that by the carbon dating. They found these tablets were at least 10,000 years old, maybe 50,000. So when I say thousands of years ago, there were native people that spoke of these things, that's exactly what I mean. They told their children, and thousands of years ago, their children grew up and told their children. And then their children grew up and told their children. They spoke about the people that will live in this time. And now it is, we are the ones they spoke of long ago. They say to be alive, to come into creation and to live upon the earth at this time is a great honor. In the circle of time, from the beginning to the end, this time we are in now will change the purification of all things. They say this is the hardest time to live, but it is also the greatest honor to be alive, to live and see this. In the state of Washington in 1855, they signed treaties and made 22 Indian reservations. They wanted to do it before there were problems. They thought they were advanced at that time. They had learned from what happened elsewhere. They made 22 Indian reservations, and the elders spoke in 1855, and they said, "We're going to become weaker, and you are going to become stronger, and if you wish to break these treaties, you may do so," they said. But there's going to come a time when the earth itself will rise up and purify itself, and this will be announced. It will be announced by the speaking of more than 16 great ones, on the west coast of this land. And when the 16 great ones speak, the purification will have begun. There was a new, and there's a question mark, 5 years ago when Mount St. Helens, one of the 16 great volcanoes on the west coast of this land, spoke. The Seattle Times did a special interest story. They went over to Watson Totus and Woodrow Bill. It was Woodrow Bill's son that made this hoop, and I brought here today my good brother Randolph Bill. They asked Watson Totus and Woodrow Bill, as spiritual people of the Yakuma Nation, what does this mean? Meki.
What they said was so profound that they didn't put it on page 16, they put it on the front page of the Seattle Times. They said, "This means that the races and nations of the earth should slow down and come together and talk to each other." That's exactly what it meant. And we had 4 years and 4 days to do that. 4 years and 4 days later, Mount St. Helens erupted the second time. That was last spring, just about this time. That was our grace period. We could still have done something really good. But now things are going to speed up. Now things are going to really happen fast. Time is going to go fast. So fast. The more we share the message, the more we will cushion the third shaking of the earth, and the easier it will be on ourselves and others. A good friend of mine in Montana, whose grandmother just passed away last year, the last thing she said to him was, "Make a place for yourself in the mountains because the air will become so hot down here." Where they were on the reservation, that it would be hard to breathe. And it won't be long. That's the last thing she told her grandson when she was passing. Go on the mountains and make a place for yourself. Put some things there that you can survive with. People are going to run to the mountains to survive, and the native people must be ready for this. We are now within the purification of all things. Non-natives call this the apocalypse. The native elders call this the purification. I want to share one non-native prophecy with you. There was a seer in Europe whose name was Nostradamus. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He foresaw 3 great shakings of the earth. He said the third great shaking will begin when Lesser Arabia and Persia engage in a war. 5 years ago, when Mount St. Helens went off, Iraq attacked Iran. Lesser Arabia today is called Iraq. Persia is called Iran. These 2 prophecies coincide. Both the native elders and Nostradamus said this will start slowly, almost unnoticed by the people of the earth, but it will eventually involve us all. Eventually, the gourd of ashes will will fall from the sky so much that the river that runs through the center of this, there's a question mark here, the Mississippi River will boil from the heat of the gourds of ashes that will fall on this land. But don't despair. It sounds terrible, but we will survive it. We will live through it. I don't think there's anyone chosen to live through it, but some people will. So in closing, I would like to call on each and every person, regardless of who you are, young or old, native or non-native, to arise now and to awake, to embrace this time, to learn everything you can about the teachings and the writings, to arise and awake and go forth. All peoples of the earth. Peoples everywhere are now receptive to the message. This year is the year when that is really going to start. I believe myself. Arise and awake, that's a phrase from the Dhammaleda of Buddha. It is time to arise and awake, to go forth and teach, to walk the road. We call it the good red road, the road that runs north to south, things that were lost from south to north, but come back from north to south. There's people out there waiting to hear, waiting to hear, waiting to hear.
Wow.
This brings to an end the speech by Lee Brown that he gave at the American Indian Congress in 1986 in Tanana Valley Fairgrounds, Fairbanks, Alaska. There's a lot in there, and I think, Dave, we just should quickly spend a few moments on the Baha'i faith, just so people understand. Many people might not be fully familiar with it, but it is important in the light of the end times that we are discussing. Now, the Baha'i faith is a relatively new religion. It's teaching the essential worth of all religions and the unity of all people. Established by Baha'u'llah in the 19th century, it initially developed in Iran and parts of the Middle East, where it has faced ongoing persecution since its inception. The religion is estimated to have 5 to 8 million adherents, known as Baha'i or Baha'is, and spread throughout most of the world's countries and territories. There are three central figures. There's Bab, who lived from 1819 to 1850, considered a herald who taught that God would soon send a prophet in the same way as Jesus or Muhammad, and who was executed by Iranian authorities in 1850. Then there's Baha'u'llah, 1817 to 1892, who claimed to be that prophet in 1863 and faced exile and imprisonment for most of his life. And his son, Abdul al-Baha, 1844 to 1921, who was released from confinement in 1908 and made teaching trips to Europe and the United States. After Abdul Baha's death in 1921, leadership of the religion fell to his grandson, Shoghi Effendi, who lived from 1897 to 1957. Baha'i is annually elect local, regional, and national spiritual assemblies that govern the religion's affairs. Every 5 years, the members of all national spiritual assemblies elect the Universal House of Justice, the 9-member supreme governing institution of the worldwide Baha'i community that is located in Haifa, Israel, near the shrine of the Bab, who was the gentleman who started this religion, of course. Okay, so interesting, I should think. It's sobering in many ways, because we are living in those times, right? Dave, I think we've seen many of the prophecies come true, and the funny thing with prophecies and predictions is that you don't really know if they're any good until they have happened, right? Because anybody can say anything for as long as they like, unless it comes true. It's just something that someone said about something. It doesn't really matter, right? But if you look at all the things that were said here and such a long time ago as well, and we've discussed this, the validity of prophecies as well here, and in fact we're going to go on with this. It is time to stop and listen, because I mean, if the purpose of that speech, and then I guess the teaching of the Baha'i as well, is to cushion the effect of the third shaking, then we really should all we can do to help with that, right? I mean, the first and second shaking, they came and went, right? My family, and I'm sure many other listeners here whose family at the time that lived through it, it's not a period that you want in your life. So if in the third shaking in the growth of ashes, probably talking nuclear bombs here, if they can really make the Mississippi River boil, ask yourself if that's a world you want to live in. And remember, we're living in a field of probabilities. Nothing is predetermined. There's still things we can do to change. There's still things that can be done differently. Maybe in Australia, the victory of the Labour Party is one of those things that can set us in the right direction. I'm not saying it is, but maybe it is. The election of a great many independent people into our parliament might be something that is good for Australia to put us in the right direction. Again, I'm not saying it is, but it could be. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I think you're kind of right there. So, yeah, not to reiterate what Mackie said, but to expand upon it. One of the things that gourds were used for was to transport hot coals. So you didn't have to make fire again. You could just transport it to a new location. And is it the coming of fire? Yeah, the earth shaking. Yeah, I can imagine. Is it if there's 16 volcanoes, I noticed the number 16 appeared twice. One was to do with speaking, and the other was exactly the same quantity of volcanoes. So is it something that happens through volcanism? The other thing that I'm thinking of is, a gourd is a vessel, and you could describe a vessel either in something that you deploy, as we know at the moment, as an armament, or is it something from space? Could you classify a meteor who's entering the atmosphere as a gourd of ashes? The subsequent mess that makes. Is it a world war? Yeah, the last two shakings completely appeared to be matching up with the prior world wars, and was as stated by the person reading that out. But is that what the next one is? I mean, we're pretty close to a global conflict, the closest we've ever been since World War II.
And Dave, oddly enough, you're 100% correct. I would have put money on the fact that we're not, but I think you're right. It's just nuts.
Yeah, the world has gone mad.
Yeah.
And not one step that's been made has been away from a conflict. They're all working towards a conflict. Everything that's happening, everyone is so belligerent and believing that everything they're doing is correct. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, Meki, the next story here is amazing, and I remember seeing. Right? Yeah, I've seen the video of this. They did a documentary on this a while ago, and it's resurfaced because of YouTube. But I do remember hearing about this in the newspaper a long, long time ago when I was a kid. So this is in 1973. An MIT computer predicted when civilization will end. So an MIT model predicted when and how human civilization would end. Hint, it's soon. There's some key takeaways. In 1973, a computer program was developed by MIT to model global sustainability. Instead, its output predicted that by 2040, our civilization would end. Many in history have made apocalyptic predictions that have so far failed to materialize. But what the computer envisioned in the 70s has, by and large, been coming true. Could the machine be right? So, why the program was created? The prediction, which recently reappeared in Australian media, was made by a program dubbed World 1. It was originally created by the computer pioneer Jay Forrester, who commissioned who was commissioned by the Club of Rome. I don't know who that is, Mickey, if you can elaborate. To model how well the world would sustain its growth. The Club of Rome is an organization comprised of thinkers, former world heads of states, scientists, and UN bureaucrats. I gotta love a bureaucrat. With the mission to promote understanding of the global challenges facing humanity and to propose solutions through scientific analysis, communication, and advocacy. Oh, the predictions. What World 1 showed was by 2040, there would be a global collapse. If the expansion of the population and industry was to continue at the current levels back then. As reported by the Australian broadcaster ABC, that's the Australian Broadcasting Commission, it's a government-run television station or media outlet, the model's calculations took into account trends in population levels, population growth, the amount of natural resources, and the overall quality of life on Earth. The model's predictions for the worsening quality of life and the dwindling natural resources have so far been unnervingly on target. In fact, 2020 is the first milestone envisioned by World 1. That's when the quality of life is supposed to drop dramatically. The broadcaster presented this scenario that will lead to the demise of large numbers of people. Now, that kind of came true, didn't it? At around 2020, the condition of the planet becomes highly critical. If we do nothing about it, the quality of life goes down to zero. Pollution becomes so seriously, it's serious, I suppose, it will start to kill people, which in turn will cause the population to diminish, lower than it was in 1900. At this stage, around 2040 to 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist. Alexander King, the then leader of the Club of Rome, evaluated the program's results to also mean that nation states will lose their sovereignty, forecasting a new world order with corporations managing everything. Sovereignty of nations is no longer absolute, King told ABC. There is a gradual diminishing of sovereignty, little by little, even in the big nations. This will happen. Mickey, good grief. Earth to Mickey? Oh, he's muted. How the program...
Sorry.
How did the program work, Mickey?
Yeah, no. Before I go to that, I just want to just pause for a second and just remember, this is 1973, okay? And it's really important to understand how long ago it was that these things were said. And a lot of the things we talk about today found their first expression in those years. One world order, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But it certainly, I don't think you find anyone that would argue with the criticality of 2020. I mean, the funny thing is this: the Shiny South algorithm, the MIT program here, we all come to the same conclusion of 2020. And then 2020, of course, came along, and here we are. And over the next, what's being predicted is a massive population reduction back to the levels of around 1900. Now, the population in 1900 was a lot lower than it is today, right?
I can hear Mickey finding the population.
Yeah, it was 2 billion people in 1900.
Good grief.
2 billion. So a lot more today. So if that is true, if that were true, we would lose some 6 or depending, 5 or 6 billion people potentially, due to various reasons. Now that's a lot of people. The Club of Rome actually started as a fairly benign institution in my mind, right? Because what they tried to come to terms with what was the problem everybody faced, and in 1968 it was founded by Aurelio Pecci, an Italian industrialist, Alexander King, a Scottish scientist. So these two formed the original Club of Rome. It now has 300 members. It's in one of my lectures from way back when Dr. Keith Sutter was in fact a member of the Club of Rome when he was lecturing me in political sciences. Now, but central to the formation of the club was Pesce's concept of the problematic or problematique. And that's, in his opinion, that viewing the problems of humanity, environmental problems, poverty, endemic ill health, urban blight, etc., etc. If you do that individually, in isolation, or as problems capable of being solved in isolation or on their own, it was doomed to failure. It was all interrelated, and that's I think that is true. It was a meta system of problems, right? That we have, and which is inherent to our situation. Is you can't really look at one thing and not look at anything else because everything is connected. In 1970, Pesce's vision was laid out in a document written by Hassan Özbekhan, Erich Jansch, and Alexander Christakis, entitled The Predicament of Mankind, Quest for Structured Responses to Growing Worldwide Complexities and Uncertainties, a Proposal. The document would serve as the roadmap for the Limited Growth Project. Now, what is that? The Limited Growth Project suggests that economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. Now, we're living in the Harvard system of economics in the world right now, where everything is unlimited. You just keep going. Because, I don't know, I work for global corporate, Dave works for global corporate, maybe many of you do as well. But even if you don't, the only thing that seems to matter is increasing profits and revenue on the same base that exists. I mean, there's a resource base that is, there it is. But all the companies are striving for ever greater profits and ever greater revenue. That is, of course, complete insanity. It's not possible. They can't all achieve it. You can only achieve it if your competition goes under or whatever the case may be, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not possible for everybody to grow indefinitely. It's a completely insane thing to expect, right? And they said this back in the 70s. Yeah, look, this is not going to happen, right? Now, if you want to draw the bow here, this is actually also linked to the Great Reset. Okay, the Club of Rome and the I guess the central statement of the problematique, the problem, right? Because the limited growth is about exactly that. We have to limit our growth. How do you do that? Well, population control is one, right? Consumption is another, right? And if people don't own anything, think about that for a second, right? Because nobody's striving anymore, right? And you know what? What's really funny? On March 14, 2019, the Club of Rome issued an official statement in support of Greta Thunberg and the school strikes for climate, urging governments across the world to respond to this call for action and cut global carbon emissions. Now, if you have the Great Reset, nobody has a car anymore, and everybody takes a bicycle to wherever their workhouse is, and that's okay, right? That's okay. Now, this is what the Club of Rome is, and this is I guess what prompted the thinking that prompted this MIT program. Now, having said that, how did the program work? World 1, the computer program, looked at the world as one system. The report called it an electronic guide tour of our behavior since 1900 and where that behavior will lead us. Dave, what does that sound like to you as a science fiction aficionado?
Hal?
No, that's good.
Please tell me. Please tell me.
No, because it's a fairly recent thing that was remade again. It's actually psychohistory, right? The Foundation saga that was written some time ago about this mathematician who had worked out a mathematical algorithm that could predict human behavior, and therefore, he tried to predict the future. Right, and it was really quite something as a thought project, I guess, back in the day, right? And it was Asimov, I think. Was it Asimov who wrote Foundation? I think it was Asimov. And here we have a similar kind of thing where we're trying to understand. Yeah, it was Asimov, Isaac Asimov. It was where we're trying to understand the future of the human race, right? By looking into the past and coming up with mathematical models. So we're looking at the past, we see what happened, we can see the trends because we know them, there's a fact there, right? So we can take that information, the data, and plug it into an algorithm and maybe come up with something that will tell us what will happen in the future. And that's what we have here. It's future history, okay, psychohistory if nothing else. The program produced graphs that showed what would happen to the planet decades into the future. It plotted statistics and forecasts for such variables as population, quality of life, the supply of natural resources, pollution, and more. Following the trend lines, one could see whether crises might take place. Now, let's pause here for a second, and I would like you to conclude it, Dave, but let's just pause for a second here. Your watch, if you got an electronic, like an Apple Watch, if you got an Apple Watch or something like that, is more powerful from a chip point of view than the computer they had that sent the first rocket to the moon. 1969, they say. Well, let's call it that, early 70s, whatever. This was 73.
Yeah.
So similar computers, one would think, probably slightly more advanced, but similar computers would have built and created this model. Right? They would have, printed out those graphs, etc., etc. Now, here's a question for you, Dave. Right? If they did that in 1973 with the computer technology they had at that time, right? How much more and how much more accurately could we predict any model today? We should be a lot better, right? Our graphs and algorithms should be a lot better, and just as a little nugget here, a little Easter egg, is that what Bitcoin mining is all about? Anyway, that's a different story there. But my point is, we should be able to produce models 1 million times more accurate than they did back in 1973. And if you look at this model here, saying, look, 2020 will be a critical year. Yep, and by the 2040s to 2050s, your population could really take a dive based on a whole number of reasons, right? Right?
Yeah.
Are we all with me?
Oh, I'm with you, right? I'm playing so many different scenarios in my head.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know, when I was at school in California in '82, that they didn't have their own mainframe, so we had an equivalent of an ISDN line to the school. And we had 20 terminals there, and we could perform functions and stuff on the local university's mainframe. It was really, really cool. So I know what tech was around. I worked with the tech, and yeah, sure, that was 10 years later. But I know what tech was there. I know the evolution of the tech and who had computers and what brands they were and what kind of, that they only had 1 meg of changeable disk space. I used to have one of the old devices that were removed at one point. It looked like an LP. It was covered in the same iron oxide as you'd find in an audio tape. But it was a disc. It was an aluminium disc covered in this ferrous material. It was really crazy. Anyway, the 1 million times more accuracy, yes, but also with a 1 million times more resolution is something to consider here about what we could do today. If you wanted to go a quadrillion times more, you could use some of the tech that maybe Google has in its pocket. That, you do a search on the entire internet and you end up, it's taken you, a millionth of a second to come up with at least 8 pages of stuff that's out there. Like, that's a lot of resource to make that happen just for you, for a whim. Imagine the computer time we're using.
Oh, absolutely.
Just for a stupid whim, or to look up a tweet. Yeah. What a crazy time we live in. So, I'm going to press on. So,
yes, sir.
Can we stave off disaster? It's a good question. As one measure to prevent catastrophe, the Club of Rome predicted some nations, like the US, would have to cut back on their appetites for gobbling up the world's resources.
Ah.
That's funny. It's funny. It hoped that in the future world, prestige would stem from low consumption. We've actually hit that in the last year.
Yes.
Low consumption is better. One fact that has not yet materialized currently, 9 in 10 people around the world breathe air that has high levels of pollution, according to data from the WHO. The agency estimates that 7 million deaths occur each year that can be attributed to pollution. Just remember, Meki, that Southern California put a rule in to try to lower power consumption, and that buying a super powerful PC was no longer a thing that you could do.
Oh, is that right?
Dell
I didn't know that.
prohibited you from buying their high range things for home. It was like you could buy the lower one and upgrade it, but that was working around the system they put in place.
Wow.
So using a lot of electricity coming at the time when EVs were going to come in, so you'd have to power them now. Just the whole world's gone mad. They're all working within independent silos, not talking to each other, and attempting to, maybe as this says, stave off disaster. I think in America you've got power sharing issues in the middle of their summer, which they're just entering into, because if there's a lack of power to distribute to the amount of people. So this is the mining rigs and video cards and things like that to be able to make money, a lazy $1,000 a month or something. Just saying, those things are trending downward. But when you have a look to see what big business can buy you, they've got a warehouse full of these devices. I mean, 3 or 4 acres under roof in 5-story high warehouses, just powering through, cryptocurrency mining. Clearly for profit. There's profit in it. Otherwise they wouldn't do it.
That's what I think.
Right. So how close are we to this disaster? Now, I've seen the documentary I saw on this 1973 computer program was green screen tech, and the numbers. I could have written a program like that. I just didn't have the thought or the algorithm that they wanted to apply. How quickly things could diminish, what variables they were considering, what parts of the environment were there. Now we know right now that it's even more complicated, and we have many more dangers just around the corner from each other now than we did back then.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't using barely any rare earth minerals. We didn't have, all of our countries were making excess food. Yeah, Australia had been through three droughts, I think, since that time. Water wasn't an issue then as it is now. You're looking at the fires in California now are just an annual thing. That has happened. It's just a thing. We've seen the coldest summer and the wettest period of time in the last, was it 8 months now, Mackie?
Yeah.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Since the record started, yeah.
Oh no, I mean the big wet hasn't ceased. My driveway has not dried out.
But it's also never been that wet.
No, it's never.
It just hasn't.
No, that's right.
That's very strange.
Oh yeah. So look, apart from the advertised or known things that can kill us all, like Yellowstone going, we could have a meteor strike, 2036. That is, Mackie. We could have a world war. we could simply just run out of resources.
Yeah.
We could hoard food in one country, starving others,
Yeah.
causing more conflict. There are certainly things we could have, and at the very least, we could have a pandemic. Imagine saying that 3 years ago, in the midst of the worst fires we've ever had.
Yeah.
So we could have a pandemic that wiped out a lot of the population. And I always wonder, where would the best place be for a population of, a worldwide population of 500 million, according to the Georgia Guidestones and Agenda 21? Where would that best be kept?
Good question. It's a really good question.
Because I've always wondered that.
Well, it depends how the climate shifts, really, right?
Yeah.
It depends how we are going to live differently, and it's going to be a very it's going to be dependent on that. And I want to say that probably not the equator, probably a really good place, because we know that the model shows that the sub-Saharan Saharan Saharan Africa is going to go warm again, and when I mean warm is green. So the Sahara will start to bloom yet again, and I think because North Africa is a massive place, I think that would be a really good place.
They've actually found aquifers now,
yeah,
beneath the Sahara Desert, which were man-made.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that is a very strong possibility, or good place to be for people.
If the planet had reached an equilibrium of temperature rise, where it found a place that it wasn't about to abruptly change anytime soon, therefore living in a postcard of a great climate, I wonder what would be revealed. So would Antarctica be revealed as a great stable place?
Maybe.
I wonder.
Yeah.
The Northern Hemisphere certainly would be troublesome because of the amount of permafrost melt. That would take a while to stabilize, I think.
Yeah.
And that could dirty up the water for quite some time.
Oh, completely. I think what you'll find is if the rains persist and maybe the climate shifts in such a way that Australia becomes a very green continent, I would say Australia might be a good place to be as well. Right? So it really all depends how this all shifts. And you know what, though? I guarantee you those models exist, because if they could do this in 1973...
Oh, they've already done it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And not only that, but look at, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but look at all the infrastructure works that are underway in Australia right now. Right? We are squeezing people into smaller and smaller living spaces around the CBDs. Why? Because I believe there will be an influx of population.
Oh, completely.
Right? So Australia is going through a massive building boom. Make no mistake. It sounds crazy, right? It sounds like, what a crazy conspiracy theory that is, Mackie. Yeah, is it though?
Yeah, look where the light rail is going.
That too. And we're talking like the big cities, and not just the big cities, but almost all areas of Australia are being developed massively. Almost all. Right? That's a significant kind of thing, right? Make no mistake. So yeah, I think North Africa, I think Australia, I think you're right. Antarctica could be very much.
I think it's valid to call it in.
Yeah,
100%. To include in the group. Yeah,
100%.
See, I think Australia has some really good benefits, and one is that there's very few earthquakes.
That is true.
We're in the middle of a plate,
and
mostly the earthquakes are bound by ancient. What are they called again? Yeah, it's like the curvature of a crushing motion, which is either subsiding or under pressure, like around Tonga. But since we live in the middle of a plate, the only other ones that we've had are usually mine related. So the Newcastle earthquake was mine related. And
Yeah.
that's crazy to think about that.
Well, think about all the earthquakes that would have come about because we are, in fact, doing all the nuclear testing.
Nuclear testing. And what about the amount of mass movement of a daily commute twice a day?
All that too, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is real stuff. I mean, this is
trillions of tons of people and machinery moving. Just nuts.
Yeah, it is completely insane.
But guess what? That's the music.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh
yes.
God.
Way. Yes. Way.
That came up real quick.
So look, this is the end of episode 531 of David Mecca's Shiny Side Out. Stay tuned for the next show is Jer Bears After Hours. Call in, dial in, listen in. It's fantastic. All right, we're going to catch you next week. And midweek too for Plato's Cave. Look out for us, David Mecca.